Welcome to Evolve. My name is Brandon Stover, and I believe that evolution of the world requires evolution of the individual. I believe entrepreneurs are consistently changing that world, and we always will be. So with this show, I will bring you the people and ideas with tools necessary to hack your growth in your business and your life. Together, let's ask the world's biggest question, build businesses to solve them, and live happy and fulfilling lives in the process. It's time to evolve. Hey everyone, welcome to Evolve. Today's guest is bringing Silicon Valley to the streets of hundreds of underrepresented founders to help them build successful businesses across 16 countries and raise $35 million in funding to scale their tech startups. Not bad for a woman who grew up bankrupt with bad credit and collections, started out as a public teacher for sixth graders, and never intended to set foot in a startup. While pursuing her PhD in urban schooling, she found herself winning a startup weekend and building the beginnings of a tech startup that would become known as the LinkedIn for Educators, which would be backed by Kapor Capital, 500 startups, and Imagine K12, and be used by schools across 28 countries, despite having no connections to Silicon Valley and no entrepreneurial background. With a love for education and entrepreneurship, she became global director of Startup Weekend Education and scaled the initiative to over 6 continents, creating the largest community of innovators focused on helping people leverage entrepreneurship to improve education. But wanting to see the other side of the VC table, she spent 2 years as the founding portfolio service director at Kapor Capital, overseeing a portfolio over 120 tech startups, including Twilio, Asana, and Bitly. But after helping hundreds of startups directly and thousands more from her 100-plus personal online publications, she recognized a gap of resources for those outside of the coveted Silicon Valley circles. In 2018, she launched a 6-week online program led by the most experienced investors, founders, and startup lawyers, training underrepresented founders on how to raise money to scale their tech startup, which has graduated 9 cohorts to date, grown its alumni by 1,165%, and has its very own $1 Million Club featuring those who have raised over $1 million by going through her program. She has received numerous prestigious recognitions such as Forbes 30 Under 30, LinkedIn's Top 10 Voices in Venture Capital and Entrepreneurship, and many more. She has been featured in dozens of publications including TechCrunch, Forbes, Business Insider, Wired, and Black Enterprise, to name just a few. And she has delivered her immense knowledge and unparalleled passion as a sought-after speaker on over 80 stages, including TEDx, Google, Facebook, Uber, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm honored to welcome the founder and CEO of Founder Gym, a member of First Round Capital's prestigious Angel Track, and a woman who's been called the OG of EdTech, Mandela Schumacher-Hodge Dixon.
Wow, very, very impressive. Yeah, hi. I'm so excited to be on the show.
Well, it's so great to have you on the show, and I enjoyed a lot of researching you, and the bio pretty much wrote itself. You have been through some amazing things, and one of the first things that I'd like to start with in your journey is actually going back quite a far way, and you playing soccer from when you were 5 years old, and how that athlete mentality taught you things about entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So I think my first time stepping on the foot of a soccer pitch was 4 years old in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Because I since then had a long career playing soccer, everyone thinks my family or my parents were huge soccer players themselves, but they weren't at all. They just kind of did what the other parents did in America and put your kids in soccer. And so I just happened to really love it. And I think the things that I could look back on and pull from that athletic experience, both from 4 years old all the way through elementary, middle school, high school, going on to college, being a captain of my Division I team, I would say athletics really taught me a lot about discipline and grit in the sense of you can actually train yourself to get better, that you do not have a set of skills that stay stagnant, but you are in charge of making yourself as dynamic as you possibly can can be. And it just requires training. It requires practice. It requires the work outside of the games that you're putting in. So that was a big aspect to it. And so even as I've evolved into designing my own training programs, not necessarily for athletes, but for entrepreneurs, I've definitely utilized a lot of those best practices in that sports psychology to help founders understand that the skill sets you're coming into this game with are not the skill sets that you have to stay with, that you can actually learn new things. You can develop stronger muscles in different areas of your business. And so that by far was a big part of it. Another big part of it was teamwork. At the end of the day, business is people, and it's a group of people behind the logo, mission statement, all the fancy stuff you see on the websites and apps. It's just people. And if you understand that, you can really start to tap into the different talents and unique abilities of individuals and bring them together in a collective space and try to put people in the right positions, run the right plays to ultimately win the game of business. And so both of those things I pulled from athletics.
Yeah, I love because your company is called Founders Gym, and the idea of, when you go to a gym, you sort of break down all the muscles that you're working on, you train each of those pieces, and you do the same thing inside of Founders Gym where you're breaking down all the pieces that you need to be a successful founder and really training these skills and building them up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head, Brandon. And that Founder Gym really is a culmination of my lived experiences, not just as an athlete, but an educator, an entrepreneur. When I decided to leave my full-time, very cushiony job at a venture capital firm and take the plunge headfirst into full-time entrepreneurship, I really did a lot of soul searching prior to making that decision about I know how hard this is. I've built a business from the ground up. I mean, it's one of the hardest things you could ever possibly do.
Right.
And so I said, if I'm going to do this again, if I'm going to take on this risk, I want to make sure it's 100% aligned to who I really am and what I believe needs to exist in the world. And so as I was designing it and coming up with the concept and the name and everything about it, again, it was really just the fundamental and the underlying belief is that you can change, you can evolve, you can get better. And it's just about giving people the right access to those things and starting with their mindset, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I love is you've shared your journey of, sort of failing your first startup, but really actually learning some things during that time. And some of the stuff you learned was, make sure that you're always working on something you truly love, have a 12-month financial safety net, and have a psychological safety net. So could you explain why these three things are so important for founders?
Yeah, because it's hard. I mean, these safety nets I'm talking about are in the sense of you need, like the financial aspect, you need money to survive, point blank, period. This is not business is not charity. There are not, in order to be a business, it's literally a transaction of value for money. I'm going to provide you X value, and in exchange of that, you're going to provide me money. Whether you're a B2B business, that's business to business, a B2C business, business to consumer, whatever the configuration of your customer profile is, it doesn't matter. It's just value and money, and it's an exchange. And so in order to survive as a business, you have to keep your eye on the money, and you need a financial safety net in order to be able to not only pay yourself, but pay your employees, pay the bills of the rent, the office, everything that goes involved in building a business. And then on the same side of that, though, there's other types of safety nets that you need. And you just mentioned one of them, which is a psychological safety net. Being a founder can be a very lonely, arduous journey. Most of the time, you're probably spending it on your computer, actually.
Right.
Like people think it's so glamorous. They see people on stages speaking, on the cover of magazines, featured on wonderful podcasts like yours, Brandon. underrepresented, and they think this is the life of an entrepreneur. This is not. I do interviews like this probably, I would say 1 to 10% of my time, if that. Like 10% is very generous. Most of my time is behind a computer, working with my team, like really rolling up my sleeves and doing the hard work of building a business. And so the psychological safety net is about who is in your life to help you push past when you get tired, to push past the obstacles that you will undoubtedly face, to push back on, to help you, push past your impostor syndrome. All the things that will come up and the emotions you will experience as a founder or CEO. You need people in your corner who will cheer you on, whether you want to identify them as coaches, assistant coaches, your training squad. Again, just building off the analogy of the gym and athletes, it is crucial that you have your support structures in place. And so that's your psychological safety net.
When you had your first startup, you talked about taking off this mask of like, everything is great and, you know, everything's going up and to the right, and this sort of mask of like pride and ego that founders get caught up in wearing. How did you start to take that mask off for yourself and start dealing with those things like imposter syndrome and anxiety?
Oh my gosh. It took me a while, to be honest. When I did my first startup, it was between 2011, 2013. So it existed for about 2.5, 3 years. So if you look at the grand scheme of things, it's like, wow, that was a short life, but it's also how the nature of tech startups.
Right.
It's either like you scale quickly or you die. That's kind of the nature of this business out here, especially if you take venture capital. And so I was just amongst many of the dead companies eventually, like over 92% are going to fail within the first couple years. I was in that batch of 92. And so when that was all happening, when I was building the business, when I was trying to scale the business, when I was eventually shutting down the business, a lot of my reflections and what I share with you now about the financial safety net, the psychological safety net, those are learnings in hindsight. You know, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. I'm not even going to sit up here and pretend like I did. Like I was a very naive, first time, over ambitious, over egotistical, like founder, in the sense of that I was so worried about my image that I let that override the truth of me not really knowing what the hell I was doing. And when you don't admit to yourself that you don't know what you're doing, you don't put yourself in positions to get help. And this was one of the biggest mistakes I made, is that I put on that I knew what I was doing. And when I'm in meetings, I'm like, oh yeah, everything's great. We're going to figure it out. Rather than going into a meeting and be like, this is what I know. This is what I don't know. And this is what I could use your help with. And if I would have taken that approach, I think I could have much, much different outcomes. And honestly, that's the approach I've taken the second time around with Founder Jam. And the success has been tremendous so far, because I've learned to humble myself. And, it's a real delicate balance with founders around, I oftentimes tell founders in our program this: you really have to couple humility with ambition. And it's a really weird thing, but there's a balance to it where you have to, like, the ambitious part, you have to believe in yourself, in your vision, in a world that does not yet exist, that you want to be a part of creating more than anything. Like, you have to believe it. If you don't believe it, there's no way you're going to convince anyone else to believe it, whether you're recruiting teammates, co-founders, advisors, investors. So that's one part of who you must be, the makeup of a great founder. But the other part of it is humility, you have to have that self-awareness to recognize, where are you strong? Where are you weak? Where do you need to get better? And then again, surrounding yourself with people to help fill in those gaps or to help strengthen those weaknesses.
Absolutely. And I love the direction that you've been taking, helping these underrepresented founders to really start filling those gaps. One of my past guests was a transgender founder, and she shared some of the hardships that she's faced as a founder. So tell me a little bit about the distance that some of these underrepresented founders have to travel to get these resources and this knowledge and these connections, and why you've fallen in love with this problem.
Yeah, what a great thing that you're doing, Brandon, with giving exposure to different types of founders and different lived experiences and identities. That is so incredibly important. So I just want to acknowledge that. I think more individuals really, really need to do that, especially when they have a platform. So at Founder Gym, we identify underrepresented as any founder in the industry whose basic representation in the overall population is significantly greater than what it is in the tech industry. So for instance, the US population, half of the US population are women, 50%, right? But if you look at who's getting funded in the tech startup industry, it's like less than 10% of the funded founders are women. So women in this industry are underrepresented when it comes to receiving financing. And that's just one example, right? We have other strands of founders that we support, whether it's Black or Latinx, LGBTQI, veteran. I mean, it really runs a wide variety of lived experiences and identities, and we're very, very proud of that. The reason why I particularly am interested in serving that is because, like I told you, when I made the decision to do this, and again, to go full steam ahead with solving a problem that I felt very passionate about, the problem is really rooted in a group of people I feel passionate about. You know, oftentimes people talk about, well, really understand the problem before you build the solution. And I'm like, I think you need to take one step further going back. You need to understand the people that have the problem in order to really build the right solution. And so for me, when I decided, well, who do I want to give my time, my talents, my energy, my life to, ultimately helping? And I really decided at that point, before I built Founder Gym, that I was going to help founders who've historically been left out of the opportunity to use tech and investment as a vehicle for affecting change in the world. And that's literally been the mission of Founder Gym, is that we're really trying to be a bridge that previously has not existed, giving people access to this wealth of knowledge, this wealth of network, this wealth of tactics and strategy and insider knowledge, so that they can go faster and farther and participate in what has quite honestly become one of the fastest wealth generators in the world, which is the tech industry. You know, the people who ultimately build these companies and then sell these companies or IPO these companies on the stock exchange, I mean, they are generating a massive amount of wealth. And with that wealth comes power. It comes power to fund politicians, to create laws that the rest of us have to live by. Right. So for me, Founder Gym fundamentally is about a redistribution of wealth. And it's about helping people who historically have not had it understand how to get it and use it to improve their communities, to further causes they care about.
Absolutely. You were named after Nelson Mandela, who has a quote that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So do you feel the education you are giving these underrepresented founders with Founders Gym is doing just that?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to bring it back to my roots of, my name, I definitely feel empowered and emboldened. And I feel like it's my duty to live up in some way to the name I've been given and the person I've been named after. But I think that education is a great equalizer. And I think it's about the applied education. I think one of the things that I had seen in the industry, again, I've been navigating Silicon Valley since 2011 as a complete insider. Like, I genuinely knew no one before. I genuinely never took a tech, entrepreneurship, finance, business, not a thing before I came out here. I'm very much like a figure it out as I go type of person. And I just believe in an education because I've seen what it's done for my life, but I also believe in the importance of applied education. I think that where there was an opportunity in the ecosystem is that a lot of the stuff out there began and ended with inspiring people or educating them, but not really putting them through a training program to get them to change their behavior. And that's literally what we're aiming to do at Founder Gym, is that we're going to put you in an environment in which you've never been before. We're literally going to give you a sample of what it's like to be a full-time startup founder and prepare you for the real world of what you will need to succeed. And we do that in a condensed format. It's 6 weeks. It's very intense, but it is a training program. So not only are we re-educating you, but we're getting you to change your behaviors real time so that you can then change the results of your life.
Yeah, talk to me about when you were first gaining the resources and knowledge and having to go through the plethora of information that's out there. Obviously, we're connected to the internet. We can almost Google anything. So how do you find the right information and not get stuck in analysis paralysis?
Oh, analysis paralysis. That is the, I feel like one of the biggest obstacles for people. It's not an obstacle that anybody else creates for themselves, but themselves.
Right.
I think the thing is to come to terms with that. Like, yes, like you said, we all have information at our fingertips with a smartphone, a computer, a tablet. I mean, it's just the information is out there. And I heard a quote before that's always stuck with me, but it was like, it was something along the lines like if all it took to get people healthy was like another diet book, like we'd all walk around with six packs. You know what I mean?
Right.
More than that. And I really took that to heart as I was thinking about designing Founder Gym. And I just lost my train of thought. Brandon, can you repeat the question really quickly?
Yeah. How do we kind of filter through all this knowledge that is out there and then, not get stuck in that analysis paralysis, knowing which one's the right information?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, again, understanding that there's always going to be more information to process than there is time to process. It is always going to feel overwhelming. Even for me, when I'm in search of an answer, I'm like, oh my gosh, how many blog posts should I read before I feel equipped to know? Like, you're never going to feel equipped to know. I think that's the thing, is like coming to terms and accepting the fact that you have to go at some point with whatever information you have. It's like at some point you have to take action on it. Otherwise, you're going to set this unrealistic expectation for you to have X amount of customer surveys and X percent of this before I can even launch what I want. You will learn so much faster by putting something out, putting it into the hands of people, getting their feedback than you ever could just reading your 57th blog post. So I think part of my competitive advantage has been that I just am willing to go for it. And I am willing to jump. And then I think in myself enough at this point where I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. I don't need to have it perfectly baked, the whole recipe book done. I may just have the first 50 pages done out of a 500-page book, but I'm willing to put it out there to get the reaction. And so a bit of it, again, goes back to that humility piece, is not being afraid to look dumb or to be wrong or to be stupid in other people's eyes. Screw other people. It doesn't matter. You're not living for their approval. I think it's really about focusing on what you want to do, but ultimately it always needs to be grounded in the people you're serving, the problems that they have, and just making sure you're staying true to that. But so again, to tie this up with a bow, I would say number one is you just have to recognize there's going to be more information out there than there is time to process it. And number two is that you're never going to feel 100% ready. Get over it. Jump anyway.
Absolutely. I think because of the nature of building a startup, of trying to create this thing that's never been made before, we face this huge amount of uncertainty. And so then we find that uncertainty in ourselves and we don't trust our gut. And so I love the advice of, just going for it, just getting it out there and seeing what's going to happen, because honestly, nobody has the answer. You're creating it along the way.
Yeah. And what I will say too is that a big thing that I did differently my second time around than my first time around, and what we built into the core infrastructure at Founder Gym, is community. Why are we just relying on our relationship with the internet to figure out how to build a business? There are so many other people out there who are 2 steps ahead of you, 3 steps ahead of you, who've already failed at what you're trying to do or your version of what you're trying to do. Why are so many of us not reaching out to more people, asking for help, asking for advice? So I'm a huge advocate for creating mastermind groups and making sure that you are pairing up with people and meeting with them on a recurring basis so that you can go faster and farther and get that information from other people's wisdom and lived experiences rather than from strangers on the internet. That is something I fundamentally have changed about the way I operate. And then I have my own mastermind group where we're exchanging ideas or running different experiments, and we get to exchange the results of those and the learnings and the best practices. So not only am I benefiting from running my own experiences, but by putting myself in a community of other people, they're sharing their knowledge. I'm just bypassing people left and right.
Right. Yeah. You have this belief that if you master people, you will master business. And you even have like an online course, which was like the preamble before Founders Gym, which was how to communicate like a boss. Yeah. And so how do we go about building our network, especially understanding this idea that it's not about you?
Oh my gosh, Brandon, you've done your homework. I haven't heard someone bring up Communicate Like a Boss since 2017 when I launched it. Wow. So yeah, that was my first pilot for Founder Gym. It was an online course that I had run. I did about 2 cohorts to just test the model of like, do people want this? Do they enjoy online education? Am I good at online education? What kinks do I need to work out? And Communicate Like a Boss literally is around this concept of what I call people magnetism. And how do you become a magnet of people? Because at the end of the day, you need people to be successful. I don't care what field you're in. And so what is it that you need to communicate, or how do you need to communicate in a one-on-one conversation like we're having right now versus a small group conversation versus on stage versus via email versus in written format or on Instagram, on Twitter? You know, all of these formats have different kind of rules or codes of conduct, or even the recipient on the end of your message. You need to be cognizant of that, but that is so important. And so how that we even incorporate that into Founder Gym, the curriculum we teach at Founder Gym right now, this is just the beginning, is fundraising, which is teaching founders how to get investors interested in them and their ideas, so much so that the investor is actually going to pull out their checkbook and wire you and give you money, right, to scale you. That's a big deal. That if you can figure out how to do that, and that's a muscle you can develop, you will be mighty successful as a founder, because it's the same skill set you need to secure investment from a venture capitalist or angel investor or get admitted to an accelerator is the same skill set you need to recruit a co-founder, to recruit, I think you were telling me, the linchpin employees, right?
Right.
To recruit, to get journalists interested in writing about you. It's all about how do you position yourself as an interesting person with an interesting company that other people should perk up and care about. Right. So that's a big part of my belief system and my teaching philosophy around just understanding fundamentally, it's not about you. And the sooner you can understand that, and the sooner you can position yourself to be of value to other people, you are going to be just fine.
Absolutely. And so one of the big things that you're teaching these founders is how to raise funding, how to raise capital. And I think you do an excellent job at that. But something I want to touch on is actually keeping the lights on at home. So when you, failed your first startup, you took a job as the global director at Startup Weekend and basically use that to help raise your personal capital back up and be able to take that second leap. So give our listeners a little bit of advice on, keeping the lights on at home while building a startup.
Yeah, I just feel like when you are choosing to be a founder, not everybody chooses. A lot of people in the world have to do this out of necessity because there are not a lot of job opportunities. And so they must become an entrepreneur. Many people that I see today are choosing to be an entrepreneur, meaning that they are employable at other places, but they are choosing to opt out of the 9-to-5 and to join the crazy ones out here trying to change the world. And so knowing that you're signing up, you have to know that this is a lifestyle choice, that you're dedicating a good amount of your waking hours to the development of your business. Like, again, if 8 hours are dedicated to sleeping, that's 16 hours left. So So another 8 minimum that you're dedicating to your business, but more than likely it's definitely going to be closer to maybe 12 or sometimes 18, especially. Right. I mean, it's wild. So you just have to be at that peace with the decision you're making, and you need to get other people who are like core stakeholders in your life, whether that's romantic partners, children, whoever is going to be affected by this decision, you need to loop them in. But I would say is that, again, entrepreneurship is a survival skill. And when you are choosing to be an entrepreneur, you are choosing to survive without a consistent paycheck. And it's up to you to figure out how to bring in that money. So there will more than likely be a period of time when you are starting a business where your business is not generating any revenue. You may not have a product to sell. You may not have a service to sell. So how are you keeping the lights on? What I oftentimes did, like every job, every time I build a business, is I have used my 9-to-5 job as the funding source for my business, meaning that I would take a portion of my paycheck every 2 weeks, put it in a separate bank account where I couldn't touch it because that's my junk jar. That's my piggy bank, so that when I hit a certain number, I can go, I can jump. And again, that's where you need to create runway for yourself, 6 to 12 months, right? Where you have enough money saved up that you'll be able to survive, because it's going to take that long for you to build something that generates its own revenue. And so, So again, I think it's extremely important to be strategic about creating this financial safety net, whether it's a jump jar, whatever you want to call it, because once you run out of money, you run out of options. I mean, it's literally the name of the game. I mean, you must keep your eyes on the money at all times, because that literally is your oxygen to survive. You're going to suffocate without the money. And so you can also, so again, one of the approaches I've taken was taking a portion of my salary, percentage, and putting that aside in my entrepreneur's piggy bank or my jump jar. Another approach is that you can build your business but take on side jobs. So I wrote a whole Medium post like years ago about great job ideas for entrepreneurs, meaning while you're trying to build your business, what are some not necessarily easy to do but flexible, not really too intense brain activities that you could do in exchange for compensation to keep the lights on while you build out this new revenue stream. And so those things could be like, I did babysitting, I did tutoring, I did soccer coaching, I did online database tagging, anything that was kind of flexible, that again, didn't take up too much of my creative energy because I wanted to reserve that for my business. But I've been a hustler for a while. And again, the thing I do want to say is I don't want to glamorize just being a hustler, because I think a lot of people stay in that mode where they actually say, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to keep the lights on, And I'm like, yeah, but that's cool at the beginning. But eventually the whole point of this was to build a business that will sustain you and your employees and grow. So at some point you have to look in the mirror and be like, when am I actually going to transition? And what is going to be required for me to fully transition to a full-time entrepreneur where my business is sustaining my lifestyle and the lifestyle of the employees I need to scale it?
Yeah, absolutely. You've talked about creating a personal mission statement for yourself before you ever create a business mission statement, and that business should be serving that. So how did you go about creating that for yourself, and what does it look like today?
Yeah, this is another huge concept, Brandon. I'm so glad you brought it up. And again, this is not my own idea at all. This actually came from a book I've read and reread many times. I'm actually re-listening to it right now. Is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And this is one of the main premises of his book. He's like, everything starts with you, and you need to start with the end in mind. Meaning, like, literally one of the first chapters asks you or prompts you to write your own obituary. If you die, what would you want people to say about you at the end of your life, right? As they're coming to your funeral. And it really grounds you and reflecting on what the hell matters, right? Like, what actually matters? What impact do you want to make? How do you want people to remember you? And that mission statement has been so fundamental to, like, as my guiding principle to how I make decisions and where I spend my time and where I don't spend my time. And your personal mission statement, again, is who are you? What do you want to do? What impact do you want to make? You can Google it. There's 1,000,001 different versions. And again, you're going to have to choose which one and then move on. But you write your mission statement, and then that's who you are on paper. That's really what you want. The goal then is to build a business that serves your personal mission. Your business needs to be directly aligned. It needs to fit in with that. And what will happen if it doesn't, and I've seen this many times, is you will experience pain. Whenever your fundamental blueprint does not match the reality of your life, that's when people get unhappy. That's when they experience pain. But the closer you can align who you actually are and what you want to what you're doing in your everyday life and the impact you're having, the happier you're going to be. And so step 1, create your personal mission statement. Step 2, then create your business mission statement and make sure they are aligned. That is incredibly important.
And you seem pretty into personal development. I've seen that you even got like a life coach after closing your first startup. And you have this idea of, to be a great CEO of a company, you have to be a great CEO of yourself. So tell us why developing yourself as a founder actually helps your company as a whole.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you set the tone for everything. You're the culture starter, the culture stopper. Everything starts and ends with you, the CEO, and it really is again about like understanding, knowing that you're the final decision maker on most things in your business, unless you've again been great at delegating. You have other top executives you're working with and you trust, and you completely let them have sole decision making power over certain aspects of the business. Most people are not there yet in their development. So what I'm going to say is you can only grow your business so far as you understand what business can be, right? So if you only understand, if you've only ever built a business up to generate a couple tens of thousands of dollars, that's where your level of understanding is on how to do this. Maybe you've never reached the $100,000 mark, or maybe you never reached the million or the 10 million, right? Like it's hard. It's like, again, understanding that in order for your business to reach those goals, you have to become a CEO that understands how to reach those goals, right? So you constantly have to be putting yourself through a workout and a training regimen to make sure you're constantly leveling up your skills so that your business can level up alongside you. And again, I've seen this happen, several times when you start involving other stakeholders in your business, whether they're your co-founders or advisors, but especially investors, because investors are not giving you, but they're investing money in your business in exchange for equity. So they actually own pieces of your company. And as you get larger and larger, you get more and more investors potentially, and they have more governing power. And so there's situations where you don't level up as a CEO, they can replace you, right? So who you were as a CEO in year 1 needs to be different than who you are in year 3, in year 5. You have to level up. And there's a lot of good information, even if you look at, for example, Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg is an engineer. He's a product person. When it came to scaling Facebook, he needed a lot of help. And he was very weak when it comes to people operations, right? All the other aspects of the business he either didn't like or just wasn't good at. So what did he do? He found himself a Sheryl Sandberg, right? So this is, again, there's common themes here: humility, self-awareness, asking for help. Like, you're not going to be perfect at everything, but you need to understand where your weaknesses are, and you need to understand how those weaknesses are affecting the business. And you need to level up. Either you yourself need to level up, or you need to recruit teammates who can fill in those gaps.
Absolutely. And there's been quite a few values. I mean, you've talked about humility, you've talked about asking for help. And when researching you, I found a lot of values that you got from your dad. How to be powerful, how to have courage, and being connected with something bigger. You even played like My Girl at your wedding because it reminded you of that. And so what are some of the key values you've learned from your dad that shaped your success?
Oh, yeah, my dad. So, yeah, my dad passed away suddenly when I was a freshman in college. And it's always been a big turning point, absolutely, in my life. My dad was my everything. He still very much is. But I would say If I reflected on the biggest things I've learned from him, I really think I get my gumption from him. Like, he did not give a damn about what anyone thought of him. And it was so inspiring to me to see someone go out in the world where they believed in themselves so much and they didn't let other people's opinions of them ever deter them from showing up as who they authentically were. And it took me a while to actually get to that place myself. Like, I used to admire it from afar. I used to be like, wow, that's awesome, but I can't be like that. Like, I just cared too much about what other people thought of me. Like, I had the disease to please for way too long in my life. And it was a hindrance. And I think one of the biggest things is, again, just walking in your truth. And what I've realized is that the more I've done that, the more successful I've been. And so it's just like, you just got to do it at first. I remember the first time, that article you were referencing about like taking off the mask. And when I really put my authentic thoughts out in the world, Medium, the blogging platform, had just started. I was an early adopter. I was like, you know what? F it. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to tell the world what I really think. And I did. And I remember sitting on my couch and my boyfriend at the time. And I was like, should I push publish? Like, I need a sanity check. He's like, I don't know. And I said, I got to do this. I got to do this for myself. And I pushed publish. I cannot tell you, Brandon, how many people reached out to me as a result of that post saying, oh my gosh, this is exactly how I feel. Thank you so much for admitting this. Like, it's like everybody's going on in this world wearing masks and pretending that everything's okay. And it's not. Like, we need to talk about this, because otherwise we perpetuate this stereotype or this image that, like, to be a great founder, you got to be strong all the time, or you got to be perfect all the time, or it's always working all the time. And that's just not the truth. And so as I learned to live my truth, again, I realized that it gave other people permission to live theirs. And that's one of the biggest gifts you can give to other people, is just helping them find their voice and helping them find the courage to be themselves. And so my father was that for me. And now I've had the great fortune of becoming that for a lot of other people. So yeah, by far, that's one of the biggest legacies he's left me. Another thing is just the level of empathy that my father had for other people. You know, both of my parents were civil rights attorneys. Like we talked about, I was named after Nelson Mandela. You can just imagine the household I grew up in, the conversations around the dinner table.
Right.
But just the fact that our lives were never about just us. They were always in consideration of how our choices affect other people and how we do have power and abilities. We were never wealthy or rich or anything, but there's still a power in being educated and having, whether it's a right to vote or a right to march on the streets, to take a stand on something in relation to how this world is or is not treating other people well. And so again, a core part of Founder Gym is helping people, like I've said, who've historically been left out of opportunities. And that's a big part of who my father has always been, and who I fundamentally am at this point. So yeah, those are two of the biggest things.
Yeah, you're about to go into motherhood, which congratulations. What are some of the things that you are going to pass along to your children?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I literally, I could, the baby can come any day now. So, and I'm very excited and very grateful. So thank you so much. The things I want to pass on, to my daughter, would be, I think it's a lot of what I shared in the sense of, life becomes really fulfilling and rewarding when it's not about yourself. And it really is about the advancement of everyone. And it's a totally different level of joy and purpose. And that's something I am living through. I've continued to live through, and I hope to pass on to her. I think, let me think beyond that. And again, you'll see this show up in like the Founder Gym, what I talked about, but like, you can choose who you want to be and who you create yourself to be. And you can recreate yourself at any time. I think that's another big thing for me, is that you don't have to stay in a box, and you don't have to accept the world you were born into. You can change it at any point. And you don't have to believe in other people's dogma or doctrines or anything like that, that those were all created by other people, and you are a person too with a voice and creativity, and you can mold yourself into who you want to be and help create a different type of world that you want to exist. And I just really believe in that personal power to change yourself so that you can then change the world. And it's something I live by, and it's something I want to make sure she understands for herself. And that'll probably be a tricky thing for me, to be honest with you, as I help her, or I try to let her have her own life and navigate it as she will. I think part of the parental instincts is you want to, you don't want them to go down certain paths where you're like, I already know how this is going to end up. Like, don't go there. Right. But they have to have their own lessons. They have to go their way. So I actually think that to flip the question a little bit on what am I going to learn, I think parenthood is a big opportunity of growth for me to let people have their own lived experiences and journeys, and to understand that they're going to have to learn hard lessons, even if it's painful for me to watch, so that they can evolve into who they're supposed to be.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I am looking to tackle in the future is where our education system is going and how education is taught. And I believe one of these things in education is teaching some of these life lessons, not just, how to do math or how to do these different things that we teach now, but really thinking about, critical thinking about, how can we evolve ourselves, be able to adapt. And you have a TEDx talk about education, saying that, it's a social construct that we created, but now it may not be working. And so where do you see education going? How do we work some of these things in there?
So wait, your question is around how do we work critical thinking?
Yeah, you work these other concepts like critical thinking and some of the stuff that we've been talking about today, developing yourself, developing communication, things that haven't been traditionally taught in education and that we just kind of have to fumble and learn through trial and error. How can we start facilitating some of that?
Yeah. So, and again, just to give people context, my background is as a trained educator. I have a master's in education administration and policy, and I started my PhD program in urban schooling, but I dropped out to do my first startup. And so I've been thinking a lot about this, and that's the reason I wanted to bring that up, is that even when I was in my PhD program, it was so interesting, again, how I was just in this space of academia where we just think about the problems that we wouldn't otherwise have time to think about, working with children every day in a school setting. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this, but I really do believe that it is about, like, you can either take the approach of trying to change the current infrastructures that exist, or you can break out, form partnerships with people of like mind and create new infrastructures and test out those things. So being someone who has worked in both type of environments, both those where I've been on the inside and they're kind of old school, archaic, just repeating the way things have done, the paradigms that have been perpetuated forever, and trying to change things. And it can be really, really hard. Where I think, and you know what? It's so interesting you bring this up, Brandon, because I think my lived experiences, and I don't know if I've ever realized this until you just brought it up right now, I think my lived experiences struggling to affect change in the school systems that I worked in was a big impetus for me falling so head over heels for entrepreneurship. Because with entrepreneurship, I no longer have to play by other people's rules, right? I no longer have to navigate and try to do politics in someone else's system. With entrepreneurship, if I believe something exists, and I know there's a significant amount of people who believe it too and who would want it and would pay for it or use it or whatnot, I could just go build it. I don't need to get permission. I don't need to wait for you to get the sign off. I can just go do it. And that to me is awesome. Awesome. And that is, again, that literally was, now in reflection, my segue into entrepreneurship, where at the time I was a teacher. I went to an event called Startup Week in Education, which was a hackathon. First time presented an idea, recruited a team, built a product. And I was like, WTF, oh my gosh. This is a world I didn't even know existed. These are my people. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to move fast. I want to break things. I want to change things. I don't want to have to ask permission and kiss rings and do all this stuff. I just want to help people. And so it was entrepreneurship is incredibly empowering. And I fell, like I said, head over heels, and I have never looked back.
Well, I love where this discussion is going, but before we wrap up with our last question, where can everybody find you and what you've been working on?
Yeah, so my company is called Founder Gym. You can definitely go to foundergym.com, and we're literally launching our 11th cohort very, very soon. So you definitely want to tune in there to figure out how to apply and how to get plugged into our community and our training program. But aside from that, Brandon, I love to hang out on Instagram. That's like my daily journal where you'll see me talking to you, sharing my tidbits of advice. Maybe you'll see my dog Marley. You probably meet my new daughter because she's coming any day now. But yeah, on Instagram, my handle is Mandela, Mandelash.
Awesome. My very last question is, how can we push the world to evolve?
Ooh, how can we push the world to evolve? I definitely think we can push the world to evolve if more people understood that they have a unique superpower. There is something that they can do better than anyone else on the planet. And if they understand that, that's step one. Step two is if they decide to live that superpower, like actually own it, like recognize it. That's what makes you different and better and special, and just coming to peace with that. And then number three is like, how are you using your superpower in service of humanity? And if you can do those things, there will be no shortage of success, abundance for both yourself as well as the world. So that by far is the thing that I think will help the world evolve.
I love that answer. And I thank you so much for dropping all of these knowledge bombs that you did today. Guys, if you want more of these, if you want to figure out how to accelerate your superpower, go and check out Mandela's Founder Gym. Like she just said, they are about to do their 11th cohort, which is amazing. So definitely check that out. And Mandela, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon. This is an awesome show, an awesome platform, and it says a lot about the questions that you were asking. I can tell you're really passionate about this, and you did a wonderful job. So I'm honored to be on the show.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Hey, you. Yes, you. I want to thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, then please open up your podcast app, rate and review. That's really going to help get this life-changing content out to more entrepreneurs just like you who are pushing the world forward. As always, my friend, keep evolving.